Right, so this time I'm looking at the Castor and bump steer on the front of the car. There's a little problem I found. Hopefully I can explain it. That if you set up Castor for 4.5 degrees or 5 degrees, which is what I've done, which means that it's going in that direction, when I then do a bump steer check, I get a lot of toe in. Right, so I'm now looking down on top. You can see I've got my gauge, which is just gently resting against the disc. So if I move this one, that one moves, and ditto that one. So as I now lift the wheel, both those should stay in contact. So as I come up in bump, I think you can see there's quite a large gap appearing there. I don't know how many degrees that is, but it's something I don't really want. So we can let him go back down again. Now the way to cure that, let's just move round. I'll take the phone off. Right. Right. The way to cure it is to lower the ball joint down. I've proved that by moving that point and the one over there. If I bring that forward, so I end up with 0 Castor, I'm effectively lowering that down. So I've already done that before. I've moved that to the front, and then I found that I had actually 0 bump steer. So I've now put that back to my 4.5 or 5 degrees. So we now have to find a way of lowering that ball joint down. Now, as it's a taper, can't do much about that. So it's going to need to manufacture a new bracket to bolt on to the back of the hub with obviously the 7.5 degree taper to lower that down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pack it with washers to try and work out what the dimensions got to be when I make up the new ones. So that's my next job. Right, I've now lowered the ball joint with a washer I've packed in there. What I'll do is, at the moment it's flush on the top, so to work out what spacer I've got in there, I'll put it back together and measure how much is sticking out. So let's see if that's cured it. Right, so that's now looking down on top. And again you can see we've got both in, so I just touch, it pulls out, and ditto that side. So I'll now raise the wheel. I think, as you can see, we're getting no bump steer whatsoever now. That's nice and parallel all the way up. So I'll now measure how much spacer I put in there. Right, that's all put back together, and the distance I've measured there is 8mm. So we knew that when that was flush with the nut, I had 0 bump steer. So the rod end needs to come down by 8mm. So I've got to make a new one of those with an 8mm drop on it. I've already measured the other side and I get the same amount of toe in, so I've got to make one for the other side as well. Hopefully that explains, but I've got to bear in mind that if you do ever change Castor by moving this one either forwards, backs, or the lower one, it will in fact lower or raise this point here, which will affect bump steer. So that's something just to bear in mind. Right, measuring Castor with wheels on and discs on is always a pain in the bloody ass. So what I've come up with is, first of all, I've laid a pole, as you can see, which intersects, if I turn it that way, it passes through the centre of the wheel, and then, I don't know if you can see, I've got a centre point there, and I've got a centre point there on the 2 knuckles. Ouch. What I've done is I've lined it up. There we are, you can see now that's going through the centre of the 2 knuckles. So that at the moment is a true Castor figure. Now I've measured that at 6.3 degrees. But obviously this is going to be difficult to do when you've got the disc and the wheels on. So what I've then measured is an area that I can get at with wheels and discs on. And what I've done is I have measured now touching there and there, and I've measured that angle, and that angle comes in at 8.3 degrees. So I know that whatever I measure here, I've got to subtract 2 degrees off. So if I measure 10 there, I know in fact I've really got 8 degrees. I think you can see that there is slightly, you can actually see that 2 degrees difference. So I've now got a reference that I can always use without taking bits and pieces off. So we'll now move on to the bump steer, which follows this. The other part to remember when doing Castor is in relation to the car itself, not gravity or the world. So as you can see, although I've got what I reckon was, 6, 7, 8 degrees Castor, because I've got the front of the car jacked up, and come down, and if you can see, so the front goes up. So what you've got to do is you've got to measure at this point, where are we? Here, get an angle across there, and then obviously you subtract that from whatever you're getting on your Castor. So if you're getting Castor at 10 degrees and the car is sloping up by 2 degrees, then your Castor is really only 8 degrees. Again, hope that makes sense. Right, slight change of plan. When I make this new bracket, I'm going to do the one mounting at the back. Where are we? There. But this one and this one I'll make slotted so that I can actually move this up or down, because I'm sure I'm going to be changing the Castor, and this is sort of a fixed point at the moment, so that's definitely going to be a change. So we'll slot those so we can move it up and down. Once again, thank you for watching.